This week's Just in Time video looks at Chapter 7, the focus of which is sustainable work systems. So I'm going to spend about the next 15 minutes talking about Lawler and Worley's take on what kind of work systems will really enable an organization to be sustainable. The goal, of course, is to try and create and support systems where innovation becomes a continuous process rather than sort of a one-time shot. We want this to be the MO of our organization. The chapter starts out with Lawler and Worley talking about what they call an LGI, and they give the particular story of a gentleman named Stu Winby of Hewlett Packard. LGI is short for large group intervention. This is basically an OD, or an organizational development technique, in which you bring a whole bunch of stakeholders together, sometimes for a few days, and you have a very structured process in which you try to bring out all of their different perspectives, typically focused around a given problem or a plan or something like that. The purpose for bringing all of these people together is that by doing so, we'll be able to speed up and, in fact, improve the quality of our decision-making process. In addition, what we're trying to do is really get some energy going around what we're discussing and the solutions that we're proposing, and then get people to commit to the chosen courses of action. Now, this gentleman, Stu Winby, looked at this, liked this idea, but he wasn't convinced that all of the information that might be needed to solve problems and move forward were necessarily to be found in the different stakeholders. So what they did is at HP, when they were bringing together Compaq and HP, is they created this decision accelerator, or DA, process. Basically, it's the same as a large group intervention, so you've got all the different stakeholder groups represented, and then you tie all of this into the organization's intranet and internet. In other words, trying to connect these people, these very smart people, these very engaged people, with the world's knowledge. And again, the idea is to try and accelerate decision making, problem solving, trying to accelerate integration, trying to make sure that we get everything out, that we bring to bear all of the relevant knowledge so that we can, to the best of our possible ability, come up with solutions that will really work. Again, to reiterate, the focus is really trying to make it so that innovation becomes a capability for the organization, so that it's just what we do. It's a continuous process. These one-time deals where you bring together people and try to solve a particular problem, they can be okay, but they don't become ingrained into the organization's culture. They don't become the new MO of how we get things done, and that's what we really want. So we don't want isolated change interventions. We want a routine, basically. Now, the chapter talks about two specific examples, Allegiant Health and Toyota, and I'm not going to spend time. You can read over those examples. I want to dive right into the characteristics of sustainable work systems. Now, again, we're trying to figure out, okay, so we have a structure that we've put into place. At least we think we've put a structure into place that will enable us to look at the triple bottom line. And now we need to make sure that we have the work systems to support that structure, whatever that structure might be. It could be ambidextrous, could be network, but I'll tell you the bottom line, it's going to be something fairly organic, where the focus is not on stability, but rather the focus is on responsiveness. So Lawler and Worley they make some statements as to what they think work should look like in order to have these work systems that will enable us to be sustainable. First, that work is based on activities, not jobs. Now, when you think about a job, here's what I want you to think about. Historically and typically, when we put together job descriptions, when we think about jobs, what we've done is we've taken a whole host of tasks or activities that in some way, shape, or form we think are related, and we lump those together into what we call a job. And it could be that it's a full-time job, so whatever that means in our organization is 40 hours or more, or a part-time job, whatever it is. The idea is that the activities have something in common. They are somehow relatable. So that's what a job is. And then functions within an organization are collections of jobs. So again, jobs are collections of tasks, functions are collections of jobs. And the idea is that this is a pretty stable set, right? If you think about how a lot of organizations work, you have a job description, and that job description is in play typically for at least a year until you have your next performance evaluation. And sometimes they can be the same for years in the plural. So what Lawler and Worley assert is that SMOs, and this is on page 163, should simply abandon the fiction that fixed jobs and job descriptions are a good thing. I mean, let's face it, how many of us have job descriptions where so much of what's listed really doesn't drive our daily behavior? It doesn't help us to decide how to allocate our time. It's just sort of a general description. Instead, Lawler and Worley advocate that we shift to dynamic work assignments, more almost like project assignments, if you will, and relationships that are characteristic of a more like a network organization. That we should focus on the objective or the goal rather than trying to take care of a predefined set of tasks. You know, in this situation, people might not have fixed job descriptions. They might not have a typical boss subordinate relationship. They might find themselves working for a variety of people or in a variety of teams over time, taking on a variety of tasks, not all of which would necessarily be related to one another in a given job description. Now, in order for this to work, of course, individuals have to get really comfortable with continuous change. And I think some people, in fact, are very comfortable with this. They really need to embrace change. They have to sort of look forward to the next way that they're going to make some kind of contribution to the organization, using their particular skill set, using their knowledge, relying on their aptitudes, and so on. Second, work should be guided by shared goals rather than functional goals. So, you know, organizations aren't really broken into, you know, here's marketing, here's finance, here's production. You know, the organization is trying to serve a given set of customers. It's trying to exist in a particular community. There really are goals that supersede, that are overarching to those functions. And that's really where Lawler and Worley say we need to focus. The problem is that functional goals often compete with one another. Where the marketing folks are really focused, for example, on serving the customer, production might be really focused on quality. And you might think, well, those two things go hand in hand. Well, not if what the customer is saying is, I want the order fast. It might not be as possible to deliver a high quality order at that point. And so now you end up with, you know, these two functions having to sort of face off. And whichever manager has more power, or whichever function has more power at the moment, or whichever function is seen as most critical to the organization's bottom line, that's the function that's going to win. But in reality, of course, when you have this function win and this function lose, now you have what's called sub-optimization, where your organization is not operating optimally. Instead, you've got all these little fights happening inside the organization. And Lawler and Worley are saying, get rid of the functional goals, get rid of the functions, get rid of the job descriptions, so that, in fact, we can focus on the overarching goals. We want to bring in all of our relevant stakeholders to talk about our goals. So people with all of the knowledge, skills, and aptitudes, which you might call the KSAs, bring all of those people together to talk about what is it that we're trying to accomplish. What's the big picture here? And when you bring people together and they have the chance to discuss with one another and to learn about these different perspectives, ideally what you should end up with is more clarity around your goals, and also people who are more committed to those goals. Ultimately, work is going to be very motivating, as Lawler and Worley say, when it's designed right. Well, that seems fairly self-evident, right? Give people a good job and they will be motivated. People have to be able to see their work in its context. So that's called task identity, where they can see, I can see how my job, what I'm doing right now, working on this project, how it contributes to the whole. They also have to see how their work impacts the overall organization and impacts customers and so on. So what's the task significance? And then finally, people want goals that are set not only collaboratively, but goals that are achievable. You know, a bit of a stretch, something that we can still make happen. Third, Lawler and Worley assert that work needs to be performed by multiple stakeholder teams and can, in fact, be virtual. Instead of, Instead of assigning individuals to jobs and making them accountable, instead we want to have cross-functional teams. Again, for so many good reasons, the different perspectives enable us to accomplish much bigger goals. We're much better able to make really complex decisions. And really what a manager's job is in this situation is to keep everyone focused on the big picture. What are the overarching goals? What are we trying to accomplish as an organization? Next, Waller and Worley talk about how work is temporary and iterative in these systems. Our goal is responsiveness, not stability. We are not interested in efficiency that's achieved through, grand scale and leverage, but rather we're interested in doing what needs to be done. We know that our competitive advantage is a temporary advantage, and so the workflow has to go as follows. We identify the issues, we design the work, we gather up the appropriate stakeholders, we make the decisions, we organize how we're going to go about implementing those decisions, and then poof, we free the resources, basically coming together over and over on project after project after project, drawing in the people we need, the skills we need, the knowledge we need, the aptitudes we need, getting the job done, and then poof, everyone is released and on to the next project and on to the next project and on to the next project. And of course, it's entirely possible that people could be working on multiple projects simultaneously. Fifth, the work needs to be supported by the physical space and by the technologies. This, I think, is pretty straightforward. But, given what we're trying to accomplish, does the space enable us to do that? Or do we find ourselves in very rigid sorts of containments where it's not possible to talk to all of the people we need to talk to, where the technology doesn't enable us to work when we need to work with the people with whom we need to work, and so on. Sixth, the work has to be managed strategically. Again, this is the role of leaders. In a command and control organization, the managers are relying on stability. They're looking for stability. They're looking for static job descriptions. They're looking for something that tells them exactly how much authority they have and over what. And the goal there is to maximize profits. End of story. Pretty straightforward stuff. The boss is the one who gets to make the decision. The boss is the one who's expected to hold the knowledge. The workers are expected to sell themselves, basically. I mean, that is one way to think about this, in order to accomplish the job. But they're not expected to be the brains necessarily for how the operation operates. They're expected to bring their brain power, their brawn, if you will, to whatever their particular job is. But somebody else is expected to do the thinking up here. In HIOs, now we recognize that employees have brains, and these are very smart people, and they have not only the knowledge, skills, and aptitudes that are specific to their jobs, but also they're able to think about the bigger picture. And so there they get to be involved a little bit more. They get to participate in decision making a little bit more. In an SMO, an organization that's really going to be sustainably managed, we have to recognize the intelligence, the brain power of everybody. And we want to bring in anybody who has relevant information. We want to bring them into the decision-making process. The manager's job is to focus on how do we make innovation happen? How do I get out of the way of my employees so that they can make innovation happen? How can I clear the path for my employees so that they can make innovation happen? How can I bring the right people together so that they can make innovation happen? Ultimately, the idea is that we want to bring the right people together to work on the right tasks. The concluding element of this chapter, it's pretty straightforward. Work systems, no matter how they're designed, need to shorten cycle times, get things moving, get those decisions happening. We need to also improve decision-making quality. We need to increase our productivity. We need to increase our commitment to courses of action rather than to jobs and to functions. Jobs and functions, those are dead ends. Instead, we want to be thinking flexible, responsive, agile. We want multi-stakeholder teams coming together, thinking about the triple bottom line, not only the profit, but also the people, and of course the planet. And that's it for this chapter.